This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. This episode is sponsored by C-School, the online school for creativity training. If you'd like to unleash your creative potential and access a free Creativity Blueprint training series, then just head over to c.school. That's www.c.school for your free training series.
In this episode, I speak with James Schramko about his new book, Work Less, Make More, and we discuss the idea of effective hourly rate, online communities, the power of SOPs, and the 64-4 rule. Enjoy this episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor. I'm delighted today to be joined by James Schramko. James Schramko is a Sydney-based entrepreneur who has started, developed, and sold multiple successful businesses. A passionate father, investor, surfer, husband, coach, mentor, and lover of freedom, James excels in making the complex world of business simple so that your quality of life can improve. In his early days, he was a general manager working with Mercedes-Benz, commanding a large team of employees in a multi-million-dollar business by day, and then being an online marketer by night. Since then, through his podcasts and online communities, he's built a loyal following and developed a reputation as one of the smartest, most no-nonsense business coaches around. His new book is called Work Less, Make More, and it provides a counterintuitive approach to building a profitable business and a life you actually love. And it's my great pleasure to have James join us today. So welcome, James.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So I think you're one of the few guests I've actually ever had on twice. I think you came on right at the very start when we first started the podcast as well, and I saw this book coming out and I said, I reached out to you. I said, I've got to have you back on. I mean, I really ask people to come back on, but this book, I just think speaks so much to our audience, and it's definitely a book that feels like that its time has come.
Oh, thank you. I'm obviously very grateful for being able to come back and having something new to bring to the table. At least we should have a fresh conversation.
So the core of this book is an interesting one because, especially in the online marketing world, we seem to be in this constant cycle of launches and one-time products, and there's a lot of noise, a lot of churn kind of going out, bright kind of shiny thing syndrome. Your book gives a completely different approach. It puts forward a completely different online business model. So one that smooth cash flow, predictable income, and ability to do the work that's meaningful without being a workaholic. As you were kind of going into writing this book, were you aware that you're going to get some flack because you're going against some common perceptions about what online marketing actually is and what actually works?
Well, I haven't really seen any flack yet, and I don't expect too much. I think the people who push certain models either don't know that there are flaws in their model, or they know it and they've just kept it a bit of a secret. And I'm not directly saying, look, this is evil, don't do it at any cost. I'm just saying people maybe have put an over-dependency on some things, or they haven't really thought much beyond what they've been told to see other angles to it. So I presume you're talking about the product launch formula and maybe the ascension model.
Yeah. Which is a very different one. And it's interesting because as I was reading this book, I was thinking back to when I first started online, and I was involved in creating lots of paid membership communities, especially for music, for instruments. I think we created over 30, really profitable, great fun, really had, bringing great teachers and creating that. And then for some reason, I started getting pulled into this more kind of launch model and that kind of ascension model. After reading your book, I was kind of knocking myself on the head a little bit and going, why have I made life so complicated for myself? I should just go back to the thing that actually worked the very first time.
Well, that's really the intention of the book. I think sometimes you have to stir a little bit to create a reaction and build some tension to get that conflict resolved and hopefully a nice outcome, much like the hero's journey, right? Yeah. And it is my nature to be very direct. And I came into this online world from the offline world wondering why people do these things. It just didn't make sense to me. And I've maintained my line for the last decade. And I'm actually friends with people like Jeff Walker and A lot of my students are students of his, and I've even used product launch formula in the offline world. When I was running the dealership, we did a spectacular launch. My main position is that it's a great promotion. It's just it's not a great business model to have all your eggs in that basket. Even the people who, are in that market will tell you, hey, yeah, it's a bit exhausting, and we're not actually seeing all of that revenue into our bottom line, just a fraction of it. And it's no coincidence that a lot of the people who were gurus when I started online have now gravitated to more of a recurring evergreen model. I think an example would be Frank Kern, who now I think the bulk of his income is in a recurring subscription model, but he was more of the one-time product launch type seller.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I think that the launch model, it definitely works, and we use it all the time as well. But I suppose it goes back to, I said that you're a lover of freedom, and I speak to so many entrepreneurs and also creatives more generally, musicians, artists, who for them, freedom is a really high value, for them. And they kind of get involved in doing this online side of things, and they quickly discover if they do it in a certain kind of way, they kind of lose that freedom part, the bit that they wanted to do in the first place.
Oh, especially artists and creative people. If some of them love freedom so much, they're prepared to not even have a house, just have a guitar and a combi and drive around the beaches. And that's fine. But I think where I'm at is somewhere in the middle. Look, I don't want to be the hardcore business dude who's grinding every dollar out of the market and having a life of suffering on the personal front. And I don't want to be the bohemian gypsy rolling around in a combi van, because I do like having a house and some money in the bank and food in my belly. I think I'm somewhere in the middle where I just want to find that nice line where you can put in a bit of effort, but make sure that it's leveraged, and also build plenty of time for yourself to do the creative pursuits. So my creative pursuit would be carving lines on waves with my surfboard. I enjoy that a lot, and I've made sure that my business provides me the lifestyle that makes me happy. And I'm at that age where I want to be happy, and I want to enjoy my life and relationships and work on good projects. So there's still little elements of that. To some extent, launching a book is a little bit of a product launch, but I'm not taking it to that high-end, free book plus shipping type stuff and buy 50 books and I'll take you to dinner sort of thing. It's really just, hey, look, here's a good book. Maybe we'll do a podcast chat about it, but that's about it. And I'll still go surfing today.
And one of the metrics that you put, actually, I think you say it's the one metric you need to focus on in your business, is this idea of effective hourly rate, EHR. And you kind of keep coming back to that. And I think it's a great tool, because I think there's a lot of, especially in the creative industries, you have so many options. You have different opportunities, and assessing those opportunities is a really difficult thing. So can you explain EHR, what that actually means and how it works?
Effective hourly rate, it's something that we can measure. So that's why I like it, because we can't measure everything, and nor should we. But it is an easy thing to calculate, whether you have a job or if you are an entrepreneur. And then it gets kind of cool where you can break it down by product line as well once you get more advanced. But it's simply the amount of profit that you're making divided by the number of hours that it took to make that profit. And if you use that as a filter, that's why we tie it back to most of the chapters in the book. You can project a recurring business versus a one-time business using effective hourly rate as the measure. You can decide of the different activities that you could do. Like in your case, you could say, right, if I built more music sites, how would that compare to a product launch that I did last? How many hours will it take to do either? How much money could I make? And then, like, as the bonus sort of advanced stuff, it's like, okay, am I building an asset that I could sell, or was this just a cash cow? And there's some of the subtle things. So it's not the only thing to look at, but it's certainly a great starting point if you've never done it. And it can actually be really shocking when people realize, they've spent.
I did it recently, just after reading the book, and I went through and I actually found, because we've done a number of online summits recently. And the EHR is truly horrendous. It's terrible. If anyone's ever created some kind of online summit, it's not a very high EHR. However, it allowed me to have a look at each of those different summits that were created and say, okay, even though that EHR isn't particularly high, I get so much value in terms of learning, personal learning from that event and networking and connecting. I'm willing to keep going with that. But maybe some of these other ones, I'm just I'm going to delete those, knock those out. They just don't hit any of those values.
Yeah, if you pull up a low effective hourly rate and there's no real byproduct or benefit, if you're not getting the education, or if you're not creating an asset that you can sell, or if you don't like it, which is pretty common, I would suggest just not doing it, and automatically your hours will go somewhere else, and you'll bump up your effective hourly rate into more profitable pursuits. And using it kind of like a ratchet system, you can progressively improve that rate over time by keeping a limit on the number of hours that you work, and then making each hour that you work more effective. Like, you get paid more per hour.
Yeah. I mean, one of the examples you use is of one of your clients who, I think it was like a PE business. So he was doing kind of online training for PE and doing events as well. And he kind of went through that process, and he made some adjustments to his business model, and it was really super effective for him. And it allowed him to kind of not just scale, but actually get a better quality of life in the process.
Massive change for Jared. I mean, he just had a baby, and he's at home with that baby now, thinking how grateful he is that he isn't trundling off to school as a PE teacher, which is what he was doing when I met him. And we just did the simple calculation. I said, Jared, how much do you make with your PE geek teaching of other PE teachers? And we worked out his effective hourly rate for that. I said, now, how much do you make as a PE teacher? And we worked out his effective hourly rate for that. It wasn't that high, because full-time teaching job in Australia, I can't be sure exactly what it is, but I'm sure it's somewhere around $65,000 a year to spend 40, 50 hours a week in a school. I'm like, Jared, you have stopped this immediately. Please.
Because at this point,
you're killing me.
He was doing his events. He had. I know he had lots of apps. He had other products that were going on.
He had music tracks for PE teachers. He had T-shirts. He had he had hundreds of apps. It was all over the place. So when we said, Jared, where's the money? Which activity brings in money? Which one doesn't? Can we just stop doing the bad ones and do more of the good ones? And we saw a stratospheric rise in his actual income and a massive redistribution of the time involved. And, quite funny now, he still loves mucking around with stuff, but these days he's been piling in money by trading cryptocurrency and started an app business that's it reached six figures almost immediately because he has this capacity to deliver on high value activities now.
I'm wondering, because you have two main communities. You have your I think is it Superfast, the main Superfast community, and then you have a kind of an upper tier, more like a mastermind level. I'm wondering, when you're having to coach people on these, how do you deal with the bright shiny thing syndrome? So they're maybe they're all getting same emails from some of the same gurus saying, this is the strategy to go for, this is what to do. How do you keep people on the kind of straight and narrow and not let them get too distracted by all these bright shiny things?
Well, I address it as chapter 1 because it is that important. Firstly, the fact they've taken me on board to help them, it means they've got someone in their corner to let them know, where they're not being responsible. So I do encourage people to look in the mirror and take full responsibility. People like Ryan Levesque had me coach him for 3 years, and my main role with him was to be his truth teller and to question him and to put him through exercises. Just why is he doing this, and what's the possible outcome? What else could he do instead? And it's good to have someone supporting you with that. But I do ask them to go through some exercises. Like the first thing we do is like say, okay, where is that time being spent? I want their time tracked, and that's a big realization. And then I need to get them out of their inbox, because your inbox is a to-do list that other people get to add things to. So we have to be very careful who we give permission to be assigning tasks to us. Now, if you go and subscribe to every marketer, well, you now got all these marketers subscribing tasks for you. You know, open this, do that, attend this free webinar, download this new software. It can get a little bit out of control quickly. I get support away from the inbox and into a help desk. I make sure they turn off all their alerts and notifications so that their adrenal gland isn't getting belted, the dopamine release, you know, because there's very smart engineers sitting around scheming how to keep you on their platform so they can sell more ads and get more data. I do ask them to unsubscribe from stuff, and then we set up bumpers, which is really something I was reminded from my kid, that we should just set some boundaries here where we just won't stray. We commit to a short time period where we won't take on a new project until the end of that time period. So no matter what comes up in that 12-week period, we can hand out the excuse card. Look, I'm going to be reviewing that at the end of my 12-week sprint, so I'm just going to park it to the side and I'll get back to you. And then it just turns off that opportunity to get derailed.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, as you were kind of writing this book, because the book is deeply tactical, I would say. I mean, there's big picture stuff in terms of having a different mindset, in terms of building your online business, but you really get down to the tactical very, very quickly, as well as step by step. Every chapter has, okay, do this, you tick these things off so you can start implementing this stuff. I'm wondering what's the feedback you're getting so far in terms of which of those tactics people are really surprised about how effective they are?
So we did ask the question of the pre-orders, and the common ones that come back are effective hourly rate is a key topic, very, very popular, because most people have not been real with themselves about where their time's spent. So that's shocking and profound. The other one that I've had good feedback on is the offer that converts. Like an offer that converts is essentially the most important thing you need to have for your business. And that is something that you can actually sell, that people want to buy. Once you have that, it unlocks a lot of the other pieces. For people who are already in the market with something that converts, then they're really interested in things like building a team and choosing the right business model. Those chapters are very powerful for them. And then some of the more analytical people really like the cash flow and the profit formula, because they can instantly see, well, this is how I can grow any business from now on with this formula that not enough businesses are aware of.
Now, one of the ones I thought was really interesting was obviously many of us heard of the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. You go one step further with it. And you just talk about, actually, I'm trying to think the word in terms of it's not compounded, but actually it goes even further. Fractal. That's the word I'm looking for. It's fractal. So what was that all about? What was that chapter about?
Oh, this is the chapter. Perry Marshall, who's a big fan of Richard Koch, who wrote the 80-20, and Perry Marshall put out a book called 80-20 for marketing. He gave me feedback and said, look, this isn't 80-20, this is 80-20 squared. I think he liked that chapter too. So you're in good company. The point of the 80-20 is that it applies all the way down the line. That's what fractal means. I didn't know that until I read Richard Koch's book, by the way. And if I thought, what if I 80-20 the 20? Like if 20% of the things are getting me 80% of my results, then surely 20% of the 20% is getting me 80% of the 80%. And so I checked it like 5 times. I really wanted to make sure this is right. But what I figured out is that 4% of the things you're doing are getting you 64% of the results. And that I find to be a wild concept.
That is a wild. I mean, I think as I read that, I thought if ever you do a TED talk, it should be on that, because I think that has so many different applications. It's such a powerful 64-4. It's such a powerful concept when you think about it.
It is, and I Googled it and had a look around. I didn't really see anyone talking about it, but it just explained to me why I was able to stop doing most of the things that I was doing, and there was absolutely no change in result. The bottom line is that almost everything you're doing is a waste of time. And people have touched on this with essentialism and some other great books around that get to it. And Timothy Ferriss wrote about it, of course, in the 4-Hour Workweek, the 80-20. It's just something that, okay, most entrepreneurs know about this, but I would say that hardly any of them would have taught their team about it. And especially haven't taught their family about it. Like, I'm constantly reminding people that not everything is equal. It's just such a tempting thing to do, to treat everything equally, but it's simply not the case. So even if you're doing something as simple as packing for a holiday, or let's get an example, packing for a holiday, there'll be some things that are just more important. Like, if you only took one thing, you'd probably want to take your passport if you're going international, because without that, it's not happening, right? You could forget your underpants or your toothbrush, and you can buy another one in the hotel foyer, but you can't get a new passport as easily. So it's far more important. Now, if we think about this across our business, there'll be some things that are absolutely critical, and then there'll be a lot of stuff that's just a waste of time. And I just stopped doing some things, and nothing happened. So nothing negative happened.
So it's the idea of getting comfortable with that as well, because I think, there's this constant, and obviously social media feeds into that as well. And we're talking about some of the kind of general marketing emails you get as well, kind of feeding into that. I need to be doing stuff. I need to be, actioning all the time. And actually one of those 64-4 ones I thought when you were writing in the book was this idea of building a team, and actually the SOPs, creating those standard operating procedures. Those felt very much like, if you can spend time on that, it's the rewards coming back to you in terms of saving of time and being able to scale your business. It's a huge return.
Yeah, it's massive. And so they're just a little tiny, it's a skeleton, or I would call it the DNA of a business, is that SOP architecture. And once you have that, the business can replicate and scale without you being involved. And that's why it's so important. It's more important than tinkering around building your website or mucking around with fonts, which is I'm guilty of doing that in the beginning, which is a bit silly. In hindsight, I spent 9 months till I've made my first sale online, and I was doing all of the things that I wouldn't be seen doing now. I'm one layer back from all of this stuff, where it's you shouldn't be doing these things, and it does take discipline to let go of those things, especially if you're good at it. That's when it's particularly hard.
I'm seeing, I've noticed you have kind of moved very much. I mean, you always kind of had this moving towards a more membership, recurring kind of model. And I think that's, you've definitely, it feels like you've moved away from selling lots of individual products. And I've been also noticing a trend that's going on with artists more generally, with things like Patreon, where a lot of people are going from just doing the album launches or the product launches and actually trying to create communities and membership-based communities. Is there anyone that the membership model is not right for? It actually, if you're this type of person, the membership model is perhaps not the best way to go.
Well, I want to just sort of go up one bracket. I think above the membership model is, in terms of general nature, is the recurring subscription model. And within that recurring subscription, model, the membership is only one kind of recurring subscription. So firstly, I want to say, look, if the membership model is not for you, that's fine. There's still recurring subscriptions such as services. You could be on a retainer as a service provider, and that's not a membership. You could have an info product that's sold on subscription that does not involve having a membership. So you could send out a newsletter or a DVD or a box with something in it. But if you're a nurturer, then a membership makes sense. If you want to build a community or a tribe, and there's a lot of good reasons to do that, it does help if you have that sort of nurturing or parenting attribute. If you're more of a cat person than a dog person, if you're less friendly or whatever, and you just do your own thing, and the worst thing for you in the world would be to have to be responsible for other people or to nurture them, then I would say maybe avoid the membership, because it is a lot like raising kids. And
you have
you're going to yeah, well, I've got 4. I mean, I'm not Mormon or anything, but or Catholic, where typically they might have 7 or 8. But I do have enough kids to know that, having had my online communities for about 9 years now, 8 or 9 years, it is like parenting. You've got to be responsible for it. It grows up. It goes through stages. It changes dynamics as you get different people coming through, and you do have to sort of sometimes be the ruler and make policies or decisions and control it a little bit, the direction of where you want to take it, and you've got to give it new life and update it constantly. So that's the thing about the membership. At the same time, though, it's just unbelievably rewarding and fulfilling to create a tribe and have a movement who you're responsible for and you interact with, in much the same way as when your kids grow up a bit. They're less dependent on you, but you're still kind of proud of it.
And I was messaging the other day with the artist, just an artist, Amanda Palmer, who's made a big move into using sites like Patreon to do her membership. And what she was saying for her is, by releasing her all that time to do the big launches of her albums or creative projects, that time she basically got back to create more creative work. So she moved, because having that model allowed her to take actually more risks as a creative as well.
Oh, way more, because you've got income coming in and you can invest in things that you avoid the feast famine scenario that entirely launch dependent businesses have. And it's true to an extent with me with putting out a book. I haven't really had to build a big launch around it because I've already got a community, and all I need to do is create a good book and put the book in the hands of the people who are very passionate about the results they've got, the material. So it's nice to see some of my students support me and ask their community to buy it, because a lot of them, by the very nature of me building communities with them as a coach, they have their own communities, very strong communities too, like Ezra Firestone and Ryan Levesque have built fantastic communities. And then the product gets out into the market and good things can happen. So nurturing a community with things like live events and local meetups and interactive discussions and really caring about them is a fundamental for membership building. So if you don't like any of those things, just stick with more of a behind the scenes type business model, of which there are plenty. Like Apple with their annual music subscription, Amazon with Prime, Google with their G Suite. I mean, it's hard to get some of these companies on the phone, right? And they do create community pages for members to talk with each other, but they're not really actively involved. They're more in the service provision or subscription model, which is pretty cool.
And I think the other we ran an event recently where we had I think over 5,000 professional speakers, so keynote speakers or seminar style speakers. And what was interesting was we did a survey to everyone, just asking them what kind of education they enjoy. And it was fascinating seeing how, depending on what stage they were in their speaking career, the kind of level of education and membership and community that they wanted. So often people just getting started, frankly, a book. Just give me the book. I just want to buy the book. As you get it further up, you get to more of those like masterminds and retreats. So I guess by kind of creating those products, you're also defining what part of the market you actually want to serve.
Absolutely.
Have I just left you dumbfounded? So I'm just wondering here, you have this kind of EHR, effective hourly rate. Kind of final question, one of the final questions for you is just to, as you were kind of looking at your podcast, I mean, you were kind of one of the early podcasts I remember listening to. Did you go through that EHR process for your podcasts? Because I can't imagine something like a podcast would be a very high, it would have quite a low effective hourly rate.
Well, actually, I do. When I had my different business models, I apportioned the time that I spend on podcasting towards the profit that's coming from the businesses, because for me, it's my prime marketing channel. And I can see an absolute correlation between time spent podcasting and sales. For example, when I do one podcast a week, I make X number of sales. If I do 3 podcasts a week, then it will double sales. It's a very clear path. So all I need to do is look at the profit that comes from those sales and divide it by the number of hours that I'm putting into business. But for me, podcasting is actually one of the it's the fundamental traffic activity, and it most definitely has a high effective hourly rate. So there's only really 2 activities that I'm doing these days. It's marketing, which is mostly podcasts or a little bit of sharing ideas on Facebook, but not much. And then there's capacity, which is just delivering on my coaching. Because I have a recurring subscription model, I spend the bulk of my time dealing with people who I've already met and who are already paying for my services. So, for example, my Tuesday morning and afternoon, and then my Wednesdays really outward facing, where I'm just delivering on my coaching, and then occasionally doing some podcasts on other people's shows. And in between, I make sure I record a piece of content each week for myself. But when you think about it, it's probably only an hour a week of podcasting for me. So if I were to take 50 hours a year, and my business generates several $1 million in revenue, and my costs aren't that high, then it's still a really worthwhile activity for me to do to sustain that business.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's also that thing of with podcasting, it's such an intimate way of communicating as well, where you're kind of right inside people's heads in their ears as well. I'm a huge podcasting fan. So for people that we've been talking about this book, Work Less, Make More, where, people want to kind of learn more about the book, pick up their copy of the book, where should they go? Should they go to your site, or should they be going straight onto like one of the many online stores out there?
Yeah, just head over to Amazon. You should find Work Less, Make More by James Schramko on Amazon, in your local Amazon, whichever country, and should have definitely the Kindle, and most of them now have the paperback. And I'm recording the audio version soon for Audible, which will be great.
Fantastic. Well, I must
for those podcasting fans.
Exactly. I mean, of all the books I've read this year, it's probably the one that's had the biggest. I'm going to sense it's going to have the biggest impact in terms of how I change my business model as well. It's definitely got me thinking. It's one of the reasons I really like your work is you can be a contrarian at times, and I like that you question. So thank you so much for writing this book. I think it's a really timely book to be getting out there as well, and I wish you all the best with all your events and with your communities.
Thank you, James, and I've really enjoyed being on your podcast. And I wanted to slip the word contrarian into the subtitle, but the consensus with my fantastic editing support there from Kelly was counterintuitive, might be easier for people to relate to. I don't want to scare them off too much, but I'm glad you like it, and that's the point. I want to stimulate some thought. I definitely don't want to start fights, but I do want people to question what they're doing. and see maybe there's a few alternatives they could play with and definitely measure if that has an impact on their effective hourly rate. And I wish you massive success with that.
Well, thank you. And if anyone wants to listen to the previous episode we did with James talking, we kind of went more into his kind of creative life and other things that he's involved in. We'll put a link here as well as the link to Work Less, Make More. James, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I wish you all the best with the book.
Thank you.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.